Welcome to the Dream, Plan, Start, Grow podcast hosted by Allison Turner. In each episode, we interview real, everyday entrepreneurs to learn how they got their start, what challenges they faced and overcame when starting the business, and what successes each has had. Welcome to the Dream, Plan, Start, Grow show. My name is Allison Turner. I am your host. Today, I am speaking to Caroline McGinley, see if I can speak today. And I'm probably going to butcher the name of your company, so I may let you say that. Is it La Gringuita?
Yeah, that was perfect.
La Gringuita. But the reason I'm speaking to Caroline today is she's she's owned the business for, I guess, several years now, but she started the business actually in Uruguay, and then the pandemic hit, and then she transferred that up to the United States and has built it out from there. So what's the story behind the start of the business? I know you were living in Uruguay. I don't know if you were there for other reasons. I can't remember the story.
Yeah.
And then you started the cookies down there.
Yes, I actually was never planning on starting a business. That was not in the 5-year plan. I'm actually really not the type of person to have a 5-year plan, but I graduated college and knew that I wanted to live outside of the country. I had studied abroad in Spain for 2 semesters and then had worked in a hotel in Spain a year after that for like 3 months. So I was proficient in Spanish, and I'm obsessed with traveling. So I knew, I really wanted to go outside of the country. Didn't really know, or I don't want to say I didn't care where I went, but I kind of, I'm pretty adventurous. So I would have been happy, anywhere. And, but I decided on a Spanish-speaking country because I wanted to, perfect the language. And then I ended up taking a course, and I got certified to teach English as a second language. Applied for a job in Argentina, actually, not Uruguay. And they actually sent my resume over to their branch in Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay. And I got the job there. And I had never even met a single person that had been to the country before.
I don't think I know anyone that's been there.
Tiny little country in between Brazil, just under Brazil and next to Argentina. So lots of people overlook it. And yeah, I didn't really know anything about the culture. I was Googling before I left, but I had the job, but I didn't have a place to stay. So I just packed up, a couple of suitcases, or maybe just one suitcase. I can't remember what I did, but I'm a really light packer, one of those. But so I went, and the job did pay for like 2 nights in a hotel, and that gave me enough time to find a place to live. And I ended up finding a dorm style apartment. They're actually pretty common, where, there's like students or young professionals. And it was there that I started baking American style desserts.
Huh.
Yeah, so, but again, it was never the plan to start selling them. So, at this time, so my first job, because I ended up having 2 jobs while I was living there. My first job, it was pretty cool. I was an English teacher for the Uruguayan government. Oh, wow. So I taught video conference classes to public high schools throughout the country. I had about 1,000 students, and they weren't my own, like it wasn't like a homeroom class,
right. But
I just appeared on the TV screen as like a special class once a week for those kids. Okay. And I was also a kid myself, so it was pretty funny. I was 23 years old, teaching high school students, and I look really young too. So interesting. But anyways, I was working like a ton of hours, and so really my closest friends were my roommates. I definitely living in that dorm that first year, being in a different country, and trying to find your way, just being in that community really helped. And we spent all of our time in the kitchen. I mean, not all of our time, but we spent so much time in the kitchen. And so it really, really impacted me. I mean, it was definitely just living in a different country is you'll have like that personal development, kind of figuring out who you are and, your identity. And I was only speaking in Spanish, like outside of work. So trying to figure out how to express myself in a second language, where I was proficient, but, trying to make jokes or like understand cultural references and, laughing, but like not really getting it. Like,
That's the story.
Right. So definitely, once I did start, and I've been a baker my entire life. It's just always been something that I've liked to do, mainly for family. But once I started baking, just really because all of my roommates were amazing cooks, so I just wanted to contribute, and it ended up just being like a way to express myself in ways that maybe I couldn't have in the second language. So I was baking, and my roommates were all like, oh, wow, like American style cookies don't really exist in Uruguay. I know, yeah. I mean, it's actually like you don't really understand what is so like traditional American until you leave the country and you don't see things that you can get here, So there were some chocolate chip cookies at some cafes, but they weren't very good. I feel like, to make a good chocolate chip cookie, you use good butter and good chocolate. And I don't think, I feel like a lot of the cookies were made with some type of like oil instead of a butter, and they just weren't right. It just wasn't the same. So I wasn't making my own recipes in the beginning. I was just following standard, like traditional chocolate chip cookie recipes, and then doing other things. And my roommates were like, oh wow, like you could sell this. And I still didn't think that I would start selling them. This is like in the beginning, know?
Right.
And I'm just trying to figure out, how to just do adulting, but in a different country, Right, exactly. But then, one of my friends had like a huge influence on me, and if it weren't for her, I wouldn't have started selling cookies. And that's just a fact. So her name is Marianjo. And she actually immigrated to Uruguay around the same time as me, but probably maybe a couple months after. And we became good friends. So she came from Venezuela. She was actually, she was an anesthesiologist in Venezuela. Yeah, had dedicated her life to studying, to becoming the doctor that she wanted to be. And then had to leave her home country because of, the political situation there.
Wow.
And she came like also by herself. So we were in the same boat. Obviously she was a fluent a Spanish speaker, but she had her accent that's very different from a Uruguayan accent.
Yeah.
And so, we both kind of were going through similar, I don't want to say culture shock because I never really felt culture shock, but just similar difficulties that happen when you are living in a different country. But she came for totally different reasons. I was trying to be there because I love traveling. I wanted to meet people, make friends, and, experience life. And she was there just
forced out.
She was forced
into being there.
Right. And she didn't want to be there, but she had like the most positive mindset. And I just know that like looking back, she taught me what a positive mindset is before I had started listening to all of the podcasts and everything, as an entrepreneur, you have to, but this was before I even thought that way. And she was also obsessed with food. We were both like just huge foodies, and she has a huge sweet tooth. And so she was like, I make brownies and, carrot cake and things like that. Like, we should sell our baked goods together. And I was like, no, but still, like, I just really never thought that that something like that would happen. I was not confident enough because I think, as we all know, to start a business, you need to be, the confidence levels have to be extremely high because otherwise you're never going to do it because it's terrifying. So anyways, I wasn't confident enough, but right around like my year mark of living there, I was like, let's do it. And so we did one little, it wasn't like a green market even, it was very small. There were like 15 vendors, I think, but we did one and I just, felt like fire. I was like, I don't know, I felt it for the long term. But at this time still, I wasn't making my own recipe, or I had like, you know, made my own recipes based off of tweaking others, but it wasn't like the cookies that I have now. But still, you know, I just got so obsessed. And then, and my friend Marianne she was like, you know, like, this is fun, whatever. But, so really because of her, I started, but then we didn't continue working together. It was definitely a solopreneur, adventure for me. But we still lived together, and then I started selling my cookies. Around this time, it was like I knew that I wanted to start a business, because I had that craze that I think entrepreneurs get. And I was actually originally thinking I would make Americanized alfajores, which I'll tell you what an alfajor is. So it's kind of like the Uruguayan cookie. So, you know, Americans have chocolate chip cookies, Uruguayans have, and they also, it's not only within Uruguay. This is just like, it's in South America where these alfajores are very popular, but if you ask a Uruguayan who invented them, it's like in Uruguay. If you ask an Argentinian who invented them, it's Argentina.
Right.
So
fighting for
their
rights.
Exactly. They're very proud. But but it's an extremely common cookie, and it's like a cookie sandwich. So it's like a butter cookie stuffed with dulce de leche. Like a sandwich. Oh, it's delicious. It just melts in your mouth, and the cookie is kind of crumbly, and it's so good. And dulce de leche, again, is like the most popular thing in the country. They eat dulce de leche like Americans eat peanut butter, I always say. Or, you know, like I eat peanut butter. Maybe I shouldn't speak for the rest of the country, but I eat peanut butter pretty much every day. So
yeah, I'm an almond butter freak, so
right?
I just eat it out of the jar.
Exactly. It's so good. So anyway, so I kind of started experimenting with unique typical desserts that you would find in the United States and trying to like put them in an alfajor, you know, dulce de leche with peanut butter instead of just, you know, trying to give it my own spark, I guess. And I gave some to a friend, and he was like, yeah, this is good, but like, can you make me cookies also? And, you know, and
the American cookies.
Right, exactly, because it wasn't something easy to find there.
Right.
And that's when I guess something just like clicked for me, where I decided to make you know, like jumbo stuffed cookies in Montevideo, and I started experimenting, and I experimented for months. Was covered in flour. It just kind of and it's funny too, because at this point I was already confident, like I had said, I was following recipes my entire life. I never, you know, baking, you think that you can't, you have to follow everything to a T. Like you can't just add ingredients the way that you want, you know, baking is a science. Like that's what I've always known. And, but I had already gotten some confidence in tweaking recipes, because really just because of that first year in the dorm style apartment, we just like really didn't have measuring cups. We just kind of, you know,
this looks like a half a cup.
Right, exactly. I would use coffee cups and then real spoons and just kind of feel things, and I would mix with my hands and like feel the texture and see if I would get it right. So I already was kind of practicing that before, and then when I started to make my own recipes, it was all about like feeling the texture, and then, you know, when I decided to sell, I was taking notes the whole time, because you can't just.
I think this is how I did it.
Right. I did do that, and I like something came out perfectly, and then I didn't take notes, and I tried to remake it, and it just didn't come out. So after that, I was like, never again. I still have my journal of like my initial notes, which is fun. But once I came up with my flavors, I launched it just through social media. And, you know, I was obviously doing it just out of my apartment. And at this time, I had moved out to a little studio apartment that I was able to live by myself, and I had switched jobs teaching, so I wasn't working long hours. I know this is a long story. It gets kind of confusing because so much life happens at this point, but I switched teaching jobs. So I was no longer teaching for the public high schools, like 12 hours a day. I was teaching a student with special needs, actually, at the American school, and I was teaching her general subjects, but it was very similar to like teaching a second language, basically. And I was teaching half days. So I was sitting on my recipes, now I had perfected them, and now I was teaching just half days, and I had the afternoons free. So that's when the business kind of started to get rolling.
Right.
And I would post pictures. I am a photographer by hobby, not profession, but I'm not bad. And so the pictures were nice and appealing. And I started getting orders. And in the beginning, I was... so this is what I was doing. So to not have like food waste, because obviously it was just starting and, making larger quantities because that's what you have to do in order to make good margins.
Right.
And not large quantities, but,
Didn't have that commercial kitchen yet.
No, still very small. But I was trying to, be efficient. And in order to not have food waste, I would form the dough ball, like weigh stuff and form the dough balls and then freeze them. And then I would have them all in the freezer. This is just a baker's hack. I didn't invent this, but that way I would have them. And when somebody placed an order through Instagram, I would just take the frozen dough ball, pop it in the oven, 15 minutes before their designated time to pick up. And then they would get a box of hot cookies. And even before that, I was delivering. I would get on buses and just like deliver it to people's homes. But I started to, I got crazy. I was like very obsessed. Because I realized that I was good at it, and it gave me, an identity that I was looking for. Again, like as I said, it's hard living in a different country and trying to figure out, how to navigate things. So, so I got very obsessed. Before I had people pick the dough up at my apartment, I was just like all over the city on buses with a box of cookie, like, crowded with everybody around me,
I can picture this.
Yeah. Cause it feels so recent to me, which it really was. This is 3 years ago. Uh-huh. And so, but it really did, it started to take off. And that's when I had people just come right to my apartment, and I taught myself social media marketing. I found out where to get boxes in bulk, on the other side of the city, where to find ingredients in bulk, also on the other side of the city. And it was just kind of chaos, but it was starting to go somewhere. And I really thought I had zero plans of leaving Uruguay. Seriously, I thought that I would be there. I loved my job teaching my student, and who's still to this day like a little sister to me. I've seen her a couple of times since COVID, actually. But I thought, maybe I would open a bakery in Montevideo, of a cookie bakery, that does not exist there. It would have been
no competition,
zero competition. Honestly, it's not a bad idea. Like maybe, maybe one day. But I just, and then I had learned so much, so much about like boundaries and, learning, I learned a lot in that. I was probably selling them for around 10 months, which isn't even that long. It was my second year living there, and I was in Uruguay for exactly 2 years, which is pretty bizarre. I got there in March 2018, and then March 2020, I had zero plans of leaving again, but March 2020 comes around, and things started to look a little spooky. I wasn't really sure what was going to happen, and I called my parents. I'm 25, and I was living by myself in the little studio apartment. So they were like, just come home, stay quarantine with us. And they wanted me home the entire time anyway. So they're like, please,
exactly.
you're too far. Right? But so, I packed a little backpack with pajamas, and I left everything in my apartment. I said, on my Instagram for the cookie account, like, I'll be back, and I thought that I would be back in Florida for a couple of weeks, a month max, really. And then I was still teaching my student through Zoom.
Right.
And so now I'm back in Florida, and it's the middle of the pandemic. It's it was a very weird time. It's now everything's back to normal, and you kind of forget what we went through. Just weird time. But anyway, so I'm there, and I'm not really doing anything outside of the few hours of teaching a day. So I'm making cookies. I'm just making I'm coming
the parents up.
Right, I'm coming
Try
up
this
with
recipe.
Yeah, seriously, I'm coming up with new flavors. All things that I wanted to release when I went back to Uruguay. And then I was again still freezing the dough balls, just as always. And then I had like a quarantine buddy. I feel like a lot of us did. She's a childhood friend, and she would come over, and she's like, huge cookie fan. She loves my cookies. And, and it's always nice to have a friend just be like, oh my God, this is amazing. And you're like, oh, whatever. So one day she came over, and at this day in particular, she was like, I just ate. I don't want a cookie right now. Cause I'm the first person to say hey, how are you? Do you want a cookie?
Come to your house.
Right, seriously. But so she's like, I don't want a cookie right now. And I was like, okay, I'll just give you a frozen dough ball, and you can bake it when you get home. And she was like, oh, whatever. So I put the dough ball in a Ziploc bag, and then I think I wrote on it like 390 for 13 to 15 minutes. And she didn't bake it right away, actually, but I remember I got a phone call from her like a week or two after, and she was like, Caroline, I'm in my pajamas, I'm watching Netflix, my entire house smells like fresh baked cookies. You need to sell the frozen dough. Don't go back to Uruguay. And seriously, and it was like, I just felt like that same feeling that I felt at the very first time after selling something that I made. I was like, that feeling of this is it. I got that feeling, and it was really hard for me actually to quit my teaching job. Tell my student, who is like a sister, that I'm not moving back. And then just decide to launch a business.
Still in a pandemic.
Yeah. But I was living with my parents at this time. So it wasn't like I had, all of these
expenses.
I was still actually paying for my rent in Uruguay at that point. But eventually my lease was up. But still, I didn't have these crazy expenses. And I knew because while I was doing it in Uruguay, I almost felt stuck doing it out of my apartment. How do I actually get into a real kitchen? How do I actually make this, legal? How do I pay taxes? How do I, I don't want to do it under the radar anymore.
Yeah,
exactly. It's under the table. I want, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it the right way. And so I was on Google, how do you get a license? An LLC, EIN. I had no idea what any of this jargon was before, really. And, thank God for Google, because Google and podcasts like this and social media if it weren't for the technology of today, my business wouldn't be possible. But I did figure it out, and I ended up finding there's a kind of a loophole for food startups in order to not have to have a crazy investment and kitchens are just outrageous. It's insane, and it just makes you also like respect so much more people that open their own restaurants and things like that, because it is wild how expensive equipment is, and the licenses, and getting floor drains and plumbing and having to renovate entire buildings so it can be within code and all of these. So the loophole is to rent space in a kitchen that's already fully equipped, fully licensed, and then you can just rent a table, and that will be your workstation. And there's a whole world of this out there. So this didn't happen just because of COVID. This is actually, it's a thing that
it's like a co-working space for cooks,
for food
or chefs.
Yeah, it is. Totally.
Kind of.
It is.
Like they have for entrepreneurs that do computer work.
Exactly. And it is so fascinating, really. But so I found a place in West Palm, and the rent was like, he gave me like a COVID deal, I remember. And it was, I think like $630 or something with tax, $640, sorry. And then per month. And so I paid the rent, I bought a freezer, I bought some equipment, and got licensed all under $3,000, which is not nothing, but again, for a food startup. Right. So I've Googled how much to start like a CPG, like a consumer packaged goods brand, and the average is $30,000. And then for food startups, It's just astronomical with all of the equipment. So I actually, since that time in August of 2020, I have not invested any more personal money in the business. So all of my printed packaging, all of my branding, all of the new equipment that I've bought, everything has just been by reinvesting profit and by being very, very frugal and by working very hard. But actually, so when I was in that kitchen, there weren't any commercial mixers. It wasn't catered to bakers per se. It was really just mainly for chefs. So, and the commercial mixers are, they can be like 30 grand. Yeah, they're massive. They're supposed to outlive you. Yeah. But so they're super expensive. So I was mixing dough, and this is what I was doing in Uruguay also, is I just mix everything by hand. And at this point, like once I had started, I was making larger quantities, and I was, so I was mixing everything by hand, and I calculated actually, I mixed over 4,000 pounds of dough by hand before I moved to before I started renting space from a bakery that actually has the proper equipment that I needed, that have the mixers. So yeah, it was about 4,000 pounds, or it was over 4,000 pounds of dough. I'm very strong.
Yeah, got the arm workout. Yeah, I need to go to the gym. I got the 4,000 pounds of dough.
Yeah, right. And so I was mixing later 2020. Well, I actually, because I hit the ground running, things started to move pretty fast for me. And so I got licensed, was in the kitchen by August 2020. And then I think it was by November that I had started selling to my first retail store. And my packaging wasn't very pretty at this point. It was plain white bags with just a sticker on it. But I reached out to Cotton Capers, which is a very well-known gourmet marketplace. And I just emailed them, and I was like, hey, I have these cookies,
I went in your store.
Right, yeah, they're really good. And so this is, I think, a great way to go about something like this when, I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't act like I knew what I was doing. I think I took the side of being a little bit more vulnerable, and when I emailed her, or I didn't know it was a she, but when I emailed the general, help email of Cotton Capers on their website, I said, hey, like I started this business. I would love to one day sell to a store like yours. What requirements would I need in order to do something like that? And I I'm not going to lie, I had done a lot of research. I could have found that information out myself. But I think by asking that, they were much more open to meeting with me. And also they're just really nice people. It's a great place, family-owned business. Yes, definitely. And I know, so the dad had started Cotton Capers actually, and he started on his own, and now his daughter and son are running it. And so I think that they understood, or could empathize with me a little bit. And so anyways, so Jessica responded to me and she was like, we would love to meet with you. And that was honestly a goldmine for me because, well, she met with me and then again, the nicest thing, after meeting with me, she got back to me pretty quickly and was just like, we loved, all caps. So this is something that I'll never forget, like loved your cookies, And then when I met with her, she told me like, oh, you need the ingredient label, where it's made, the direction of the address of where it's made, and the weight, and that's just what the FDA looks for. And so pretty easy to pop a sticker on the bag to get that information. So I did it right away, and then I started selling there. And once I also realized, because starting a business in the food and beverage industry is it's extremely hard for people to take you, I don't want to say to take you seriously, but you either need like a great real estate or a lot of money to market yourself in order for people to find you, or take you, see you as a legitimate business. Right. So I didn't have either of those things. I don't have a brick and mortar, and I really don't want one because my plan is wholesale. But being able to partner with a business like Cotton Capers gives me legitimacy. It gives my brand legitimacy, and not to say that my cookies aren't amazing, they're the best, but it's nice.
Hopefully you say that.
Right? They're the best. No, but it's so important for other people to recognize, because they're not going to try your product just because, you seem like a nice person. Like no. They're not, that's not how it works. So once I had my foot in the door, my first retailer, I started being able to wholesale to other stores. My second store actually was Palm Beach Meats, which is again a very reputable business, but also amazing people. So I think I'm getting a little lucky here, or I have been lucky so far, because they're a phenomenal family-run business and some of the hardest working people I know. And they also have a huge vision, and stuff like that aligns really nicely. But I do think like wholesaling first to another legitimate store helped get into Palm Beach Meats. And right before I got into Palm Beach Meats actually was when I had enough money to get printed packaging that was very colorful. It has very nice photos of the cookies on it that, it can sell itself, whereas like I don't have to be constantly promoting it, which is the end goal. And so right when they opened, I had my fancy, as I like to say, packaging, and then started, I hate sales calls, to be completely honest. I'm not gonna lie, I don't want to say I'm not good at it, but I think that once I'm able to really start hiring people, which I have hired people, but not sales positions, that's going to be the first thing. Like I need help. Right. I try, but anyway, so I have gotten into 8 gourmet marketplaces. Awesome. Thank you.
I think the last time we talked, maybe it was 1 or 2.
Right.
Just been a little while, but still.
Exactly. So I still am going at it. So I sell from Vero to Miami. I also partner with a meal prep delivery business, because I was delivering in the beginning and I know my boundaries. I'm like, okay, I can't do this anymore, so it was great to partner with this meal prep delivery business, because they deliver my dough all from the Treasure Coast to Miami-Dade. And right, I know. And so definitely but I'm still in the very beginning phases, the infancy phase of whatever, of the business. But yeah.
How about bigger retailers like a Whole Foods or Fresh Market or one of those gourmet?
Yeah. Well, I did just recently get into it's a supermarket in Miami. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's Milam's. And it's similar to a Whole Foods. You know, it's very large. You walk in and it's a supermarket. It's not a gourmet marketplace like I'm used to. And it was very hard to get in. I had to be very persuasive. But they're giving me a trial period right now. Okay. So, and they don't want me to do any tastings, because I would gladly go there and bake cookies on site and hand out all of the samples. Yeah. But since it's a trial period, since I'm a new business, they say that they want to see if it will sell itself. So I'm just telling everyone.
You're in Miami.
Right.
Go to the store.
Coconut Grove at Milam's. And, but hopefully, you know, that pans out. Yeah. And if it doesn't, I will keep knocking on doors. And then, so another great avenue for a food startup like mine is to try Whole Foods. So Whole Foods is really great. And I've known this since the very beginning when I started Googling, you know, how to start a business and whatever. Yeah. And especially with food, like how do you get into a retailer? So Whole Foods is actually known, and I did not know this before. Whole Foods is known for buying from small businesses and working with you, and you can sell to just one Whole Foods. You don't need to sell to every Whole Foods in the county or region. It can just be one store. And I know it's really great. So I have stocked corporate, the corporate office that is in Fort Lauderdale. And I know the woman that would be the potential buyer for a product like mine. I mean, I don't know her personally. And a great way for me to find out about what steps to take is really just by talking to people that have done it. Yeah. And so I've talked with other businesses that have successfully sold to Whole Foods and now sell to many Whole Foods. One woman sells to every Whole Foods in the country that spoke with me. And she said that she sent 1,000 emails in a year to her potential buyer. And then so another business that I spoke with, so they said that they also send emails every day before getting their attention. So I'm in that process, and I'm not really sure if it's the right way or if there's more that I can do. I'm in it right now. I'm in the trenches, so I don't have an answer for you. Delivered to her? I know. I'm
like, you got that carrier, like, let's go.
Right?
Like a personalized note.
I know. I think that that's probably what I should do, but I don't. It's so delicate. I don't want to mess it up, but this is probably just fear holding me back. You know, what could go wrong instead of thinking about what could go right.
Right.
But that's actually where I am right now. And then I'm just, again, Florida is so seasonal. So it's September, and I'm preparing for the rush that October will bring. So, and I know it will be very busy this year. I'm participating in the West Palm GreenMarket, which is very, very well known in the area. And this will be my first season there.
The big, huge one.
It's massive.
Yeah.
They've
been there once.
Yeah, it's extremely crowded.
Saturdays?
It's Saturdays, and they expect around 3,000 people every weekend. So it's just a beast. And I mean, but I'm very excited for that because it's all about exposure. Again, my business is literally just 2 years old. It turned 2 this past summer. So it's all about exposure and, popping up everywhere and anywhere that I can. But again, learning my boundaries. So last year I did sometimes 6 markets in a week, and that's just not feasible. It's just or sustainable.
6 in a week.
It was sometimes 2 in a day.
Cookies
and be in the kitchen. And thankfully I do have an assistant in the kitchen, and he's the best thing in the world. He is one of the most remarkable humans. He's amazing. So I'm so fortunate. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of, I just came from the kitchen today. We were there. We did around 700 dough balls in 5 hours, and
700?
Yeah. Yeah. And they're hard work. It's not, it's like working with clay because they're stuffed. So each dough ball is literally handcrafted, and there's no way of getting around that. It's, because you need to use the heat of your hands to help meld the dough around the filling. So
so there's always going to be, even if you got into like Whole Foods across the country, there's always going to be some kind of personal side on this.
That's how I see it.
So there's no way to.
I think, long term, it's hard to imagine the process changing. I'm sure that it's changed so much since I started. So right. I'm sure there will be some type of way to speed up the process. Mm-hmm. But I can't, unless, and I'm still constantly learning about the new technology out there too. Right. So I guess it's too soon to say that it's not possible. But for now, everything will be handcrafted. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just picturing, like, I don't know if you ever watched I Love Lucy, which is, I know, way before your time, but...
I've seen some of it, yeah.
Yeah, there's an episode of Lucy and Ethel, like, on the candy line.
Yes, it's very famous.
Yeah, exactly. So you see that kind of over and over, and so I'm picturing, like, this line, this little line of, like, people are, like... And then it goes to the next person, and then and they're like, oh, too many balls, and like they start eating the ball. I'm just picturing that.
Yeah, that could definitely happen one day, to be honest. And it is kind of the way that we work. And I actually did just bring on someone else in the kitchen too. So now there are 3 of us making the dough balls. Luis and I are still the only ones that are actually making the dough ourselves. The following day is when we form them. So the dough does rest 24 hours before we form them. But yeah, so now we're 3, and it is it's always interesting finding, Luis and I have our own flow, and then bringing somebody else in, to
get them in the right flow, the 3 of you.
Right, because it really is like an assembly line, right. It's not, we're not there to have fun. We're there to really make some dough, and but she's wonderful, so I feel like it's a great fit. But it's another interesting aspect, I think, of being an entrepreneur that doesn't have any business experiences, figuring out how to work with people and letting go a little bit, and I really try to trust and be okay with some errors that happen, and because that's normal, and then you learn and life goes on. But I think that you can't, I'm not going to be a micromanager, and perfection isn't the goal. It's just really to provide a wonderful eating experience of a warm and gooey cookie, in the comfort of your home. So, and that's what we're doing.
Oh, that's great. And there's no way to ship these across the country at this point.
So, kind of the same way that I partner with the meal prep delivery business. In a perfect world, I would wholesale to a business that already ships frozen. Okay. That way I don't have to take that on myself, because logistically it's a nightmare. I don't have the storage space. I'm still renting space in a bakery. It's not my own space. And, so I would, in order to make that happen, I would have to order, the boxes in bulk with the styrofoam insulator in bulk, because they're very expensive, with the ice packs and dried ice. And, I'm in the kitchen 3 days a week. I'm in farmers markets 2 days a week. And I do deliveries also. How many days in the week are there? Yeah. What's a personal 24 life? In a week. Come on. So shipping nationwide, I decided this from the get-go, is I think, building a brand, it's great to do it very slow and organically, because then you do get a local following. And once you get that local following, that'll spread. But if I were to ship across the country, I wouldn't have the connection with my customers. And, it could be great, but I think in building the brand for the long term, I need this foundation. And so I think having doing it organically, and really just connecting with customers is a way to build the foundation that I see.
Okay. No, I think that's good. Have you ever tried to get in wild forks?
I've Googled them. They're on my radar. And I haven't, I may have at one point sent one of those emails because I am an email sender. Just kind of, I think in order to get into a business like theirs, I would have to be a little bit more persistent, but that's not a bad idea. So
I know they have the ability to do what you're talking about, like ship, with the coolers, and they keep expanding out because I buy some of our meat comes from there.
Do you?
And then, they have like delivery, like I guess I don't know if they use DoorDash or one of those local deliveries, but then I've also have it shipped to me where, you ship it and they put it in dry ice and those cooler things, and
right. And they're local.
Ship anywhere.
Yeah. And they are a local business and they're growing.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking, because they have that whole dessert thing in their store, and then
do.
On their website when I go to order meat, they're like, "Do you want this?" And it's like dessert.
Yeah,
so,
they have a lot of frozen desserts too.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. They have like the lava cakes and like the frozen key lime pie, and now I'm getting hungry.
I know.
Starting to talk about desserts.
Always.
But yeah, it's interesting because I interviewed someone else that's a little younger than you are. I think she just turned 24, so she's like a little bit more fresh out of college, and she came out right during the pandemic.
Wow.
I think it was 2020 she came out of college, and so she was trying to start her own business, or she wasn't trying to start her own business. She wanted to work in the industry, and she had a job lined up, and then the pandemic hit and the job went away.
Yeah.
And so she started a business, and it was a business, like she started a branding company.
That's awesome.
And so she's up in New York City, but she grew up here. And so I know the family. And so it's been interesting because she's kind of grown it over the last, I guess it's been in business like now a whole year.
Wow.
Just past, I think, the year mark. But she's talking about some of her challenges. She's like, I had no intention of starting a business, especially, right? She's like, I thought I would own a business at some point. Both her parents are entrepreneurs, but she's like, never, like coming out of college, let me start a business. And It was always like, on her radar down the road.
Right.
But just not at 22 or 23 or whenever she actually physically started the business. She thought it'd be a couple more years. And so she talks about how you have to keep that higher vibration and really that belief, and that she's like, I went to New York because I knew I could go out and have all these kind of web of connections, and I just go and knock on doors, and I have to prove myself because I'm only 24 at this point, and I'm selling branding, and I don't have the job from previous job where I can say, oh, I worked for some big advertising company and have she's like, I, build out stuff, and I like take it to them and say, this is how I can help you. And then, that's how she's gained clients. And then she's got clients in LA now and, all around the country.
That's amazing. Well, and especially with something like that, because I feel like it's scalable.
Yeah.
She could just train once she starts hiring, if she hasn't already, she can just replicate that model and, could turn into an extremely successful business.
Yeah.
And I wonder, did she mention how technology has helped her? And by technology, sorry, I mean social media and things like that.
Yeah. I know she's big into social media and using that because she said, I've hit all avenues. Like I go out and knock on people's doors in New York. I go, I do a lot of research, on different organizations where I think I can help them, at theaters and, different places that I think I can help. And then I'll go like knock on their door. I use social media. She was talking about all the different avenues. You can see it on my YouTube channel. It's worth the watch because, as I said, she's one of those people that's really super driven and kind of focused. She's seen both her parents grow businesses growing up, and which I think has probably helped her.
Definitely. When I think it's funny that you say that too, because for me, my parents are not entrepreneurs, and will never be entrepreneurs, which isn't a bad thing at all.
No.
But I never was exposed to it. And that's why it was never something that even seemed possible for me. But it is it's so important now for me to listen to podcasts and to watch videos of people who have done it, because you have to surround yourself with people that have, overcome their fears or failed and kept going, and, and listen to their stories where hopefully they're vulnerable and honest, because it's all about mindset.
Absolutely.
If you don't think that you can, you won't. It doesn't matter if you can or can't, but if you don't think that you can, you won't.
Yeah.
So I think that's there's a Henry Ford quote or something.
Yeah,
but
it is a Henry Ford quote. So if you think, what is it? If you think you can, you will. And if you think you can't, you won't. Or, it says something differently than that. But it's, both are right, basically, if you think So,
right.
It's all about that mindset and it's keeping that. I think that's been, one of my own greatest challenges, because I worked for people. My parents weren't entrepreneurs, and, I started it with this business as a consulting company originally with a business partner, and she had this huge vision. And then we realized very quickly we didn't do well in business together. We had very different visions of the business, very different ways to handle the business. And, at 50-50 partners, that was not a good fit.
Yeah.
But I always credit her with, I probably would never have started this type of company, and then we had started adding some of the branding and website design because we were working largely in Delray Beach, and Delray's very entrepreneurial, very small business. A lot of businesses are less than 4 employees. And so you would look at their brand or their website and you'd be like, yeah, you really don't want to build a marketing strategy, because we would be working on marketing strategies.
Right.
Some more from the consulting side. And so we started doing some of that. And then when we split and I, bought her out of the business, then I kind of built out the rest of the online marketing.
Okay.
And have eliminated the consulting and went more towards the coaching side of really working with entrepreneurs who are starting companies.
Yeah.
Either starting or kind of in that early stages of business ownership, making less than $100,000. So of really helping build that piece, which is kind of the premise behind this podcast, is really to educate people that want to start a business on kind of the different types of businesses out there, because there's so many different ones you can go into. It doesn't have to be one, a quote unquote standard or recognizable business, so yours always interested me just from the cookie side of me. That's something I like to bake, but it's not one of those things that I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm one of those people that has to follow the recipe.
Right.
Exactly. All I do, if you don't have eggs, I'm like, what can I substitute? Oh, flaxseed. I can use that, stuff like that,
Yeah.
But, I think everyone's got a story and everyone's got their own challenges behind the story.
Right.
And I think, your challenge is not only, you came back here, obviously, in the middle of this very start of the pandemic.
Right.
And then you weren't able to, because a lot of those, green markets and things were shut down. So you were able to kind of perfect the recipes at that point and build that.
And really narrow down. And so actually, it's true. When I was selling my cookies in Uruguay, I had 9 cookies on my menu. As you know, the 4 that I wholesale here, there's 4. So I narrowed it down, because I knew before I had the 9 cookies on the menu, I was changing my menu every month and just, trying to always, which is great to come out with new things, and people do love it, but it's not sustainable or scalable. And so I knew that I wanted to scale, and that's why I chose the 4 recipes that I have, the 4 cookies that I have for the bake from frozen dough, because I see the larger picture. And not to say that I don't have specials, I do. And
seasonal.
I have seasonal flavors, and I'm going to have a kind of fixed menu of seasonal flavors this year, which is a little different for me. That way I have that option for people, but they'll have to buy directly from me at farmers markets. And if they want to get it from the stores, it's just the 4, because it's
larger batches.
That way, it's larger quantities, and I can buy ingredients in larger quantities where I don't have a little bit of this and a little of that here and there. I just have, the ingredients that I get every week.
Right.
And then I'm able to buy I think I got like 85 pounds of chocolate, you know.
85 pounds? Where do you store that? Can you store that in the commercial kitchen? Or
I can store one box in the kitchen, and my apartment is full of boxes. I am very grateful for my roommate. It's full of boxes. So I've got my boxes for my packaging, which is another thing, you know, for scaling, I have to buy, now I'm up to like, I think I get about, the last order that I got my bags was 2,000 of one flavor. So I wouldn't be able to do that if I had 9 flavors.
Yeah.
At this point in the game, with the money that I have, which is, you know, I'm trying to utilize it in the most efficient way. So I think having the small menu allows that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's smart because, you know, you're kind of doing it smartly. That's the right word, smartly. Is that even a word? Intelligently, maybe that's a better word. You know, just to start to try and scale up.
Right, and this is really, I learned this by doing it the other way first. I did, but selling them in Montevideo was kind of like my test run of a lot of mistakes, so many mistakes. But it was such a learning experience for me of what not to do.
Wow. And it was probably cheaper to make those mistakes in Uruguay than it might be up here.
Yeah, I was still teaching. You know, I still had a full-time job, or, you know, I had money coming in that the cookies weren't providing for me at all.
Right.
It was just something that I was passionate about. If I were in this for the money, you know, I hopefully down the road, but right now it's really, you know, all of it's going back into the business. Okay. All of it's going back into the business. Yeah. Which I do think for other young entrepreneurs, you know, you have to be okay with that. I think that's my take on it.
I think you have to know what you're getting into and realize that, you know, I mean, and that's the other thing is, you know, like I think a lot of people they see a lot of the social media ads that are out there, like make your first million, you know, in the first year of a business. And you're like, okay, maybe there's like a, you know, small percentage that can do that. Right. Most people that I know that have started businesses can't do that, you know. And even if you're making that $1 million mark, you know, most of that money is paying out anyway on the expense side, because obviously you're building the business up to, you know, bring in the revenue, and there's expenses on this side. It's not like a $1 million profit mark necessarily, you know. So depending on what your business is. Right.
And it is true. I think there are other businesses, you know, I think in the technology, I'm not tech savvy at all. So this just goes right over my head. But I think some people, you know, if they're creating an app or something that just it blows up. Like, okay, yeah, maybe, you know. Yeah,
but I think the backstory, because I use that example, I think the backstory is that usually those people have worked on that app. So, you know, like a Facebook, for example, you know, it may have blown up from the time he launched the word Facebook, but how many years were spent like actually developing what that actually looked like? I mean, I have no idea. I've not really done the research on that, but, you know, and how much time, you know, you even hear like the Gates story or some of those stories of like how much time, you know, was spent coding to learn everything in order to launch a company like that. Right. You know, and now obviously it's a multi-billion-dollar company, but
wasn't always,
you know, whether it's Apple or Microsoft, you know.
Right. And there were probably people that didn't believe in them, you know, and they had to. I
think one of them, and I read in a book, I can't remember if it was Gates, I think it might have been Gates, who just happened to, you know, have the opportunity to learn coding like in high school, and like he got into some specialized thing and like, you know, could code all the time for, you know, 8 hours a day or something. Uh-huh. I mean, it was like something, and it's, I read it in a different book, and I'm not trying to remember which book I read it in, but it was interesting because, you know, the guy that I was talking about is like, now what if that hadn't happened? You know, like he got that opportunity and now he is where he is, you know, but what about people that don't have that opportunity but still have the same, whether it's the drive or the, you know-how, but it takes them a lot longer because they didn't have that same opportunity, you know, and it's like what plays into plays into that as well, where you have opportunities versus not have those opportunities.
Right. And it's actually so true. A lot of it is timing.
Right.
And it is being at the right place at the right time. I feel like that's very accurate, and it's hard. It's not luck. It's not luck.
No, it's definitely not luck.
But it happens at the right time. Like if I were to have blown up when I was selling in Montevideo, and I did have orders every day, Monday through Friday, I was doing okay. But if I were to have just like completely blown up, I would not have been able to handle it. My mindset wasn't in the right place. I wouldn't have known what to do. But I think after doing it for a certain amount of time and then coming back to the States, the timing was right for me. And also for the bake from frozen dough, where people weren't leaving their homes, and I offered something that they could, it was a bakery style cookie that you would usually have to wait in a line for at some bakery.
Right.
And now you can just pop it in the oven.
Your own bakery.
In your home. And especially when people were quarantining, you know, and it still is applicable today because, you'll have a dinner party and you want an easy dessert, or you just want something for yourself while, you're watching a movie or something like that. So it's, but it definitely, the pandemic, the timing of it all, was why it happened so fast for me and why everything kind of just like fell into place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the name La Gringuita, I'm assuming you started that in Uruguay?
So I actually, I was going to switch. Okay, so no, I actually was selling it under La Gringa y Mari with my friend Mariangel, even though she wasn't part of the business at all. And so since she wasn't part of the business from day one, I just kind of hid behind that name because I liked it. And it also made me feel not alone. But once I started to do well, I think I decided that I could be part of like my face maybe, or like my personality could be part of the brand. Like if you look on my old Instagram, when I was selling them in Uruguay, it's just pictures of the cookies. Like it doesn't have really anything about me, because I was insecure. Mm-hmm. And right before the pandemic happened, it was in between semesters of teaching, I actually went backpacking. It was my first solo backpacking trip. And I've been backpacking before. Again, I told you I'm very adventurous. But this was the first time doing it entirely by myself. So it was a month-long trip. And I ended up spending some time in Peru. And I got to stay with a family who, kind of long story, but it's my mom's best friend from childhood's cousin who took me in. And she was the one that called me La Gringuita, which means the little American girl. Oh. And I was already looking for a new name because I wanted to be part of the brand, or I wanted to showcase, what I've done.
Right.
And it wasn't ever to people, and I just was hiding behind that name. And so I went back to Uruguay and was going to do a rebrand. And that was, my backpacking trip was all of January. So I was back in February, and then, a month later,
everything shut down.
Everything changed. Okay. So
that's the brand you launched up here with then.
And so I started, and again, it was all about timing. Like it wasn't meant to happen over there.
Right.
And so the rebrand actually that I had wanted all along happened here. And it just kind of, it really all just kind of like fell into place. Like everything that I had learned and all of my personal experiences, and everything that I had overcome fear-wise and grown my confidence, all of it all happened at the perfect moment to launch the business here.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, as we start to wind down a little bit, I always ask this of my guests, if there was one thing you could tell someone that wanted to start a business, so one thing that either you learned along the way, in your, short journey so far, but, or something that you realized you knew that really helped you early on, that you would tell someone else that wants to start a business, what would that be?
Yeah, you will never have all of the answers. You will never know. Just start. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be so messy. And you just have to do it, because maybe you do it on the side. Right. where you're not taking as much of a risk. Maybe you're just starting a business through social media where you don't need the overhead of a brick and mortar, but just start, because you'll find your way.
Yeah.
But you'll never have all of the answers before you start.
Well, even when you do start.
Yeah. See, the
question still changes.
It's so true.
As you grow, there's always like, okay, I'm here now. So, and this was your, quote unquote goal. And then you're like, okay, now how do I go up there? Like, what's the next step? So,
it's always a challenge, and that makes it interesting and worth fighting for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if anyone wanted to either order cookies that's in this area or learn more about, where, like, the local stores that you're in, what's the best way to connect?
Yeah, so social media, I'm a big fan of Instagram and Facebook. It's Gringuita_cookies, or my website, which has a list of all the stores that I partner with.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Allison. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been great, Caroline. And thank you, everyone, for joining us again on the Dream Plan Start Grow show. If you have any questions for me, feel free to email me at success@dreamplanstartgrow.com, or you can check out all of our podcasts at dreamplanstartgrow.com, or on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. And I do offer a 30-minute complimentary consultation for anyone that's looking to start a business or kind of in that early stages of growing a business. You can go on that website and sign up for that. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Dream Plan Start Grow podcast with Allison Turner. If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. Join the Dream Plan Start Grow community by following us on Facebook or Instagram at Dream Plan Start Grow. See you in the next episode.